going on, everyone? My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can just call me Juice, because that is my nickname. Once again, welcome everyone to the Juice Alert, episode number 51 for you, ladies and gentlemen, today. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can, of course, find the show on YouTube as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. I have a very great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to be talking about mainly the NBA playoffs. We'll talk about LeBron James and the Lakers, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, the Boston Celtics. A lot of great things to talk about today. But before I do get started, I just wanted to say you guys can follow me on social media. My Instagram account is GHIMAN_MCKINNEY. My Twitter account is at GHIMANMCKINNEY. So if you want to connect with me on a personal note, you can follow me on social media. Also, if you want to get specific updates regarding this show, you can follow the Juice Alert on Twitter and Instagram as well. The Twitter account for the Juice Alert is at the Juice Alert, and the Instagram account, of course, is the Juice Alert _. And also, guys, if you're watching here on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button right about now. Like I said, that definitely helps me out right here on the show. And if you're listening on podcasting platforms, if you are feeling kind, feel free to leave me a good rating and review. Like I said, those things definitely help me out right here on the show. Okay, so I just want to dive right into the show right here. So obviously we know the Phoenix Suns knocked off the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games in the first round of the 2021 NBA playoffs. I know that Anthony Davis was hurt during that series. LeBron James was solid during the series, but wasn't, the LeBron James of old that we're used to seeing in the playoffs. LeBron did struggle to make some shots down the stretch of that series, and ultimately the Lakers defense fell apart, and now the Phoenix Suns have moved on to the second round, and they are currently up on the Denver Nuggets 3-0. I expect the Phoenix Suns to win that series in no less than 5 games, and Phoenix is one of those teams that has a legitimate chance to go out there this year and win the NBA Finals in 2021. But I want to focus in on Devin Booker, because what you have to realize about Devin Booker is we have yet to see the best version of Devin Booker yet. And I know everyone talks about Chris Paul. Chris Paul is amazing. He has a chance to go down as a top 5 point guard of all time when it's all said and done. I don't think he's quite there yet, but he's definitely close. He's climbing the ladder of point guards. But Devin Booker, to me, is the best player on the Phoenix Suns roster. And in his first ever playoff series versus LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, he outplayed LeBron James. He was the best player on the court and wasn't even close. In that series, he averaged 29.7 points per game, had 6 rebounds and 5 assists, shot 49% from the field and 43% from 3. And in Game 6, he had 47 points and 8 3-point shots made in that game. And now he's continuing to add on to that success versus the Denver Nuggets. I know Denver isn't this great team, but they're a solid team. They've got some good players. They got the reigning league. Well, I should say the reigning league MVP, because Nikola Jokic won the MVP this year. They got Jokic. They got some good players. They're not a team that's a pushover. And Devin Booker is continuing to put up really good numbers. What's Devin Booker averaging this year in the playoffs? Something like 27 points per game, shooting like 49% from the field, over 40% from 3. We've yet to see the best version of Devin Booker yet, guys. The guy is only 24 years old. This is his first time being in the playoffs, and he's shining in the playoffs, legitimately. Devin Booker, to me, is a guy that is a legitimate closer. He's a guy that you can look to go to, when the game's tight, late in the fourth quarter. He can get you a bucket. He can isolate. He can score the basketball. Devin Booker is one of the most gifted scorers currently in the NBA. And I think Devin Booker has the potential to be a league MVP one day. I believe he's legit. I believe he's officially arrived, and so are the Phoenix Suns. Like I said, the Phoenix Suns are back on the map. Obviously, Chris Paul is doing his thing. DeAndre Ayton's doing his thing. Mikal Bridges, Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, even Frank Kaminsky's a solid player. And Monty Williams is a really good head coach, okay? So, look, Devin Booker's officially arrived, and if this is what we're getting from Devin Booker, in his playoff debut, meaning the first time he's been in the playoffs, imagine what we're going to get from him, when he gets even more experience and really starts to enter his prime. Devin Booker is just now starting to enter the prime of his career, and I think he has a chance to have a great, great career when it's all said and done. He'll score a lot of points, and Devin Booker's only getting started. So, we all know LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers lost in the first round of the 2021 playoffs to the Phoenix Suns. Now, what we need to point out is Anthony Davis did get hurt in game number 4. He was hurt in game number 5, and he tried to play in game number 6, but ultimately his body just broke down on him. And some people believe in that series LeBron James wasn't quite 100%. And I will admit, I picked the Los Angeles Lakers to beat the Phoenix Suns in 6 games. And ultimately, I was wrong. The Phoenix Suns ended up being the team that won in 6 games. Obviously, injuries did play a part in that, but they were the better team. Point blank, period. And, when it comes to LeBron James, him losing in the first round of the 2021 playoffs doesn't tarnish his legacy all that much. It really doesn't to me. I still consider LeBron James a top 5 player of all time. In that conversation, I put Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal. I probably would kick out Shaq from that group and add LeBron James. And, those are my 5 guys in no particular order. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron, Kareem, and Magic. Top 5 players of all time in no particular order. LeBron James, he's a 4-time champion, 4-time league MVP, a 17-time All-Star. And let's be real, other superstar and Hall of Fame level players have lost in the first round in the past. Michael Jordan has lost in the first round of the playoffs in the past. Kobe Bryant lost in the first round in the past. Kevin Durant once lost in the first round in the past, okay? So, my stance on LeBron James has not changed, okay? But here's one thing that we need to be clear about, people. LeBron James will never be the greatest basketball player of all time. He will never be the GOAT. LeBron James, as I speak today, he's disqualified from being named the greatest basketball player of all time. And if you currently right now think LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time, you are overrating his legacy. Games like these in game number 6, where LeBron James was lackadaisical, didn't seem all that engaged, really didn't get his teammates, involved in the way they should. It took LeBron James a while to assert himself in a closeout game 6 at home, and LeBron was just lackadaisical. And let's be real, I think LeBron James ultimately quit on his team. That's something that Michael Jordan would never do. And Michael Jordan, by the way, is the greatest basketball player of all time. And he always will be. There's nothing that can change that. LeBron James will never catch him, okay? And when it comes to Michael Jordan, he was just better than everyone else, When it comes to offense, defense, he was better than LeBron James. He was the better offensive player. He was the better scorer, better shooter, better defender. He's more accomplished. He's the more clutch player. And when Michael Jordan was expected to win the championship, he won every single time. 6 NBA Finals appearances, 6 wins, never let a team get to a Game 7, undefeated in the NBA Finals. And LeBron never realistically had a shot to catch Michael Jordan. He realistically never had a chance because Michael Jordan has close to a perfect NBA career as there is out there when you combine a player's skill set and his accomplishments. Because we ultimately have to, judge the talent, but we also have to judge the accomplishments and what the player did. And, did they overcome adversity? Did you win championships? Did you win MVPs, etc., etc.? Ultimately, LeBron James quit on his team. We saw in game number 1, the Los Angeles Lakers had a chance to take control of the game, and LeBron James failed to do so. Game number 4, they had a chance. LeBron failed to take over the game. Game 5, they got blown out because LeBron James was lackadaisical and not, ready to go. And same thing in Game 6. LeBron James comes out flat. His team comes out flat, And there's way too many blemishes on LeBron James' resume for him to be the greatest basketball player of all time. That is why I'm disqualifying him, okay? Because ultimately, I don't think the Lakers are going to win very many more championships with LeBron James, during the LeBron James era. I think that at most, they can squeeze out one more title from LeBron James. And even if LeBron James wins one more championship, I don't think that puts him ahead of Michael Jordan as the greatest basketball player of all time. As great as LeBron James is, he has had way too many blemishes on his resume. LeBron James has 6 NBA Finals losses, okay? Michael Jordan has 6 NBA Finals wins. I'm sorry, people, but if Joe Montana was undefeated in Super Bowls, and by the way, he is, okay, but let's just say, Joe Montana was 6-0 in Super Bowls, and Tom Brady was like 3-6 or 4-6. I'm sorry, but if Tom Brady is below 500 in the Super Bowl, there's no way I can put him over Joe Montana. And I put Tom Brady ahead of Joe Montana as the greatest quarterback of all time because, well, he has a winning record in the NBA Finals, and ultimately he has the longevity and all that. But let's just stick to LeBron James. LeBron James has 6 NBA Finals losses. Michael Jordan has 6 NBA Finals wins, okay? And LeBron has been swept by the Spurs once. He's been swept by the Warriors. He lost to the San Antonio Spurs another year in Miami when he had a loaded roster. He lost to the Spurs by a record margin in 5 games. He absolutely choked to the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games where the Miami Heat were the clear-cut favorites to win the championship that year. He choked. That was one of the biggest meltdowns and choke jobs by an NBA superstar, maybe in the history of basketball, okay? And ultimately, LeBron James has also lost to the Golden State Warriors in 5 games. I mean, he just has too many blemishes on his resume. I'm sorry, but if you're below 500 in championship games, meaning like NBA Finals or Super Bowls, I'm sorry, you're disqualified from being the greatest of all time. It's just like, if you've only won 1 Super Bowl in your career, I can't name you the greatest, quarterback of all time, potentially. It's just not going to happen. There are certain boxes you must check, okay? And look, I don't think the Lakers are unless the Lakers get another superstar level player to play alongside LeBron James, I think the Lakers have peaked in the LeBron James era. They got a big break with the pandemic last year where Anthony Davis was healthy, LeBron James was able to get his body rejuvenated, and they were the best team all the way through that bubble. But we saw this year when they don't get a 4-month hiatus, in a 4-month break and things like that, and teams don't have to make adjustments on the fly in a bubble when it's an even playing field, the Lakers don't look so good, The Lakers need another superstar level player for LeBron James to compete and win another championship. And LeBron will need to win at least 2 more championships to even be in the discussion to be the greatest basketball player of all time, just because he's had so many blemishes in the past, okay? And when you look at Anthony Davis and his injuries, Father Time potentially catching up to LeBron James, I think the Lakers have peaked. I think LeBron James' legacy is pretty much set in stone. He's going to go down as the top 5 player of all time, maybe the all-time leading scorer when it's all said and done. He's going to put up a ton of statistics because of the way the game is being played today, because he has, for the most part in his career, had a high usage rate where he's, dominated the basketball. Ultimately, he's a great player, but longevity has played a part in a lot of these records. And offense is at an all-time high these days. So LeBron's going to put up a ton of records, but records don't make you the greatest of all time. Drew Brees is the all-time leading, passing yards leader. He's the all-time passing yards leader as we speak today. He's not better than Joe Montana. He's not better than Tom Brady. He's just not, okay? Bruce Smith is the all-time sacks leader. He's not better than Reggie White. He's not better than Lawrence Taylor, okay? And even today, when you look at guys like Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, these guys in the playoffs played at a higher level than LeBron James. And Kevin Durant, I've been saying for the past couple of years that he's overtaken LeBron James as the best player in all basketball. So LeBron, I think he's peaked. I don't see LeBron enhancing his legacy anymore. And by the way, that's not a shot at LeBron James because he's had a heck of a career, but I think that his reign as being the best in the game and, you know, him adding to his all-time legacy, I think it's pretty much done for. I think that LeBron had a chance to potentially maybe become the greatest basketball player of all time, but he just has too many blemishes on his resume. And when it's all said and done, LeBron James will never become the greatest basketball player of all time for all the reasons that I mentioned. So I now think it's appropriate to talk about Anthony Davis, who is a superstar level player that plays for the Los Angeles Lakers, okay? Now last year in 2020, the Los Angeles Lakers won the NBA championship. And Anthony Davis, he was very dominant in the playoffs. And many people were considering Anthony Davis to be maybe the best big man in all basketball. And going forward, a lot of people thought that Anthony Davis would take another huge leap and he potentially could become the best player on the Los Angeles Lakers roster because LeBron James obviously is great, but LeBron is 37 years old and eventually LeBron James is going to decline and, well, he can't be the best player in the league forever. Right now, I don't think he's the best player in the league. I would say Kevin Durant is currently right now, you know, but let's stick to Anthony Davis. The leap that people expected Anthony Davis to take this year did not happen. He had a good year, but by Anthony Davis's very high standards, it was a disappointing year. And a lot of people felt that Anthony Davis, there are reports and whispers out there that he didn't come to training camp in shape, you know. He was very inconsistent all year. He battled some injuries. And the reality is Anthony Davis's injuries and inconsistencies and unreliability at times in big games is a concern going forward for the Los Angeles Lakers. It's a big time concern. Okay? I want to take the time right now to list off the injuries that Anthony Davis suffered, not for his career, but just this year, this past year in 2021. He suffered a left groin strain, a left adductor he suffered from left adductor tightness, strained Achilles, right Achilles tendonitis, left knee contusion, right quad injury, a jammed toe, a right calf contusion, and in the playoffs, he had a groin injury that, you know, sidelined him for, you know, most of Game 6, the most crucial game of the playoffs for the Lakers because they were down, you know, 3-2. They need to win Game 6. You get the point. Anthony Davis this past year in 2021 played in only 36 games. And what you have to know about Anthony Davis is right now, this guy is 28 years old and his body is already breaking down. It's very sad to see this happen, okay? And Anthony Davis is not a stranger to missing games. He has really struggled to stay on the court consistently. He has dealt with the injury bug a lot. He's a very injury-prone player. In 2013, he missed 18 games. 2014, he missed 15 games. 2015, he missed 14 games. 2016, 21 games missed. In 2017 and 2018, he did play 75 games in back-to-back seasons during an 82-game season, which was very good. But in 2019, he missed 26 games. This past year in 2020, he only missed 9 games. And this year, he goes on to miss 36 games, okay? Anthony Davis is constantly injured and not able to stay healthy. That's just the reality. And I think Anthony Davis and LeBron James significantly benefited from the bubble last year where there was a 4-month pandemic, a 4-month hiatus where everyone got a huge break and a huge rest period. But I'm sorry, there won't be very many more pandemics and 4-month hiatuses for Anthony Davis to get his body right. That's just not the reality. And if Anthony Davis can't stay healthy going forward, the Lakers are not going to win another championship. Unless they acquire someone like Damian Lillard or Steph Curry to go alongside LeBron James, I'm sorry, they're not beating the Brooklyn Nets of the world led by Kevin Durant. They're not coming out the West potentially because there's a lot of good teams in the West, you know? And this is significant because LeBron James is 37 years old right now. And right now, this roster doesn't have a second superstar level player. And LeBron James proved this year in the playoffs that he's pretty much peaked. He's not capable of consistently dropping 30 to 35 points every single night. LeBron James has to pick his spots because he is older, because there's some wear and tear on his body, because he's been injured himself the past couple of years. And if Anthony Davis isn't reliable, like I said, this team is not going to win a championship because right now, the Suns are really good. The Nuggets have a chance to be really good next year. The Jazz are really good. The Clippers are really good. The Mavericks could be a force to be reckoned with next year. The Memphis Grizzlies are on the rise. And not to mention Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets. They're a juggernaut. I expect them to potentially become maybe the next dynasty. They're that good, okay? 2022 is going to be a huge year for Anthony Davis. And really from this point going forward, these next couple of years are crucial for Anthony Davis because he's just now starting to enter his prime. These should be the best years of Anthony Davis's career. But if he can't stay healthy, if he can't stay in shape potentially, and if he continues to miss games, not only will he continue to disappoint, as a player, but the Lakers as a team are going to continue to disappoint because one thing we know is when Anthony Davis misses games for the Lakers, they're a whole different team on offense and defense. So, going forward, I'm very concerned for the Los Angeles Lakers and Anthony Davis. I hope and pray that Anthony Davis gets his injuries, corrected and fixed and he gets his body right because when he's on the court, he's a dynamic player, but only time will tell if he can stay healthy. So, the Los Angeles Clippers beat the Dallas Mavericks in 7 games in the first round of the 2021 playoffs. It was a great series. It was back and forth. It was very excellent basketball played. And look, I'm going to now take the time to give a lot of props and a lot of praise to one Kawhi Leonard of the Los Angeles Clippers. What you have to know about the Mavericks and Clippers series was the Los Angeles Clippers were down 2-0 in that series. And everyone in the national media, it seemed like, wrote the Los Angeles Clippers off. And if the Clippers potentially lost that series, Tyronn Lue, their current head coach, probably was going to get fired. And potentially, this team was going to get broken up. And recently, I made a segment on my show several weeks ago talking about the pros and cons of Kawhi Leonard. And I said, I don't necessarily question Kawhi Leonard's talent. I question his intangibles, his leadership qualities. And I said, when you are in a crisis and things are going wrong, you don't want Kawhi Leonard on your team. I don't trust Kawhi Leonard to overcome adversity and overcome a crisis and things like that. But I have to admit, I have to give huge props to Kawhi Leonard. He did not fold under pressure. And when it mattered most, he got it done in this series. The Clippers overcame adversity this year. Something they could not do last year. They blew a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets last year. It was a mess. They had bad chemistry all year. And while their chemistry isn't perfect these days, still down 2-0. I wasn't super confident in Kawhi Leonard, but Kawhi Leonard and the Los Angeles Clippers overcame adversity versus Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks. And look, Luka Doncic was excellent in that series. He averaged over 30 points per game. And Luka Doncic has a bright future because he's only 22 years old. But Kawhi Leonard was overall the best player in that series. He brought the team together when they needed to be brought together. He rallied the troops. And he played a big chunk of minutes in Game 6 and 7. He really amped up his defense. And in that series, he averaged 33 points per game. He has 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and shot 60% from the field. That's amazing. And in Game 6, when the Clippers were down 3-2, 3 games to 2, that was the best playoff game that I ever saw Kawhi Leonard play in his career. I know he had a 36-point game in the NBA Finals a couple of years ago versus the Golden State Warriors, but overall, that's the best game I've seen Kawhi Leonard play of his entire career. And Kawhi Leonard just seemed like he refused to lose. And like I said, Luka Doncic was great in that series, but he didn't close out the Clippers when it mattered most. And Kawhi Leonard even got his teammates going. Paul George played well, Reggie Jackson played well, Marcus Morris played well down the stretch. And Kawhi Leonard might have more greatness in him than I actually realized, because in San Antonio and in Toronto with the Raptors, I realized Kawhi Leonard was a very good player and was very talented, but he wasn't asked to always be the alpha of the team. He was not always asked to be the undisputed, not only best player, but also the best leader on that team. And with the Clippers, he's now the undisputed best player and the undisputed leader of that team. He had to come in and establish a culture. He had to come in and set the tempo for his team. And I gotta tell you, the Clippers, they could ultimately make a run to the NBA Finals. I think Kawhi Leonard, he might have more greatness in him than I realized. Like I said, I think Kawhi Leonard deserves a ton of credit for rallying the troops versus the Dallas Mavericks. And ultimately, we'll see what Kawhi Leonard continues to do as far as writing his legacy in the playoffs and for his career going forward. So look, we all know the Los Angeles Clippers are a very talented team. Like I just said, I think Kawhi Leonard's a very talented player, and I even think that Kawhi Leonard, I think he might have a little more greatness than I initially thought, because I think Kawhi Leonard this year has improved as a leader, and I think that he's really, taking on the role of being the best player, on the court every single night, as well as the best leader on the court for the Los Angeles Clippers. But with that being said, I don't know. I think Kawhi Leonard and the Los Angeles Clippers are a little bit too inconsistent to win the NBA Finals, at least in 2021. And really going forward, I don't know if they'll win a championship in the Kawhi Leonard era, especially with the way the Brooklyn Nets are looking. Going forward, until the Clippers can prove to me that they're a consistent team, or that they can become a consistent team, the thing is, every night, I don't know what I'm getting from the Clippers. I really don't. One minute, they look like one of the best teams in all basketball. But I gotta be honest, for about 3 to 4 games of the Dallas Mavericks series, I felt Dallas honestly looked like the better team. I know that the Clippers won the series, but Dallas gave them some real problems. And Dallas is not a great team. They're a good team. Luka Doncic is amazing, but who's Luka Doncic's, other superstar level player on that team? Oh, guess what? It doesn't exist. Tim Hardaway Jr., I like you, but you're not a superstar. Kristaps Porzingis, he's becoming one of the most overrated players in all of basketball. I'm sorry, but the Clippers barely beat the Mavericks. And look, I do think the Clippers have a chance to beat the Utah Jazz. They're currently down 2-1 to the Jazz. I expect the Clippers to actually win this series in 7 games. And we'll see if they can beat Phoenix. I do think they have a legitimate chance to beat Phoenix. But I don't know. I just think the Clippers are way too inconsistent of a team to win an NBA championship, because I don't know what I'm getting from Paul George every single night. And we know Kawhi Leonard is pretty steady, even though Kawhi Leonard, for what it's worth, some nights he doesn't look like he's himself. Some nights he doesn't seem like he wants to guard the best players. And the thing I always have said about Kawhi Leonard is you don't get the Kawhi Leonard dominance on a night in and night out basis. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, they bring it every single night. And while Kawhi Leonard might not be capable of that, and honestly that's okay, because rarely do you see an NBA superstar able to perform at the level that, a KD or LeBron is able to perform night in and night out. So I'm okay with Kawhi Leonard sometimes, maybe not being the MVP level player every single night, even though he's getting paid to do that, but Paul George, he's just way too inconsistent of a second option. And really, who's the Clippers' third option? Reggie Jackson? Morris? Batum? I'm sorry, but I don't think the Clippers quite have the firepower. I think their roster is built kind of weird. They really don't have a rim protector, really don't have a true point guard on the roster, and they really struggle late in ball games. They really do. And Kawhi Leonard's not the best communicator. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why at times things are not completely easy for the Clippers, because if you're a great communicator, everything's clear, but Kawhi Leonard is aloof at times. He's a solid leader, but he's not the leader of a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan. Very few people are, but the bottom line is things have not come easy for the Clippers the way it should, because this team is one of the most talented teams in all basketball. They should be winning these games a lot more easily, and they should be able to close out these games, but Paul George is inconsistent. Sometimes we don't know what we're getting from Kawhi Leonard. I think Tyronn Lue is a good coach, but not a great coach. They don't really have a rim protector. At times their bench is inconsistent. I don't know. I just get a lot of inconsistencies from this team, and ultimately, until the Clippers show me they can be more consistent, I don't see the Clippers winning a championship. They will be in the picture. They will compete. They will maybe even make the NBA Finals, but I could see them falling to a team like Brooklyn when it's all said and done. So, let me shift to the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks lost to the Clippers in the first round in 7 games, and ultimately the better and more talented team won the series. The Clippers, they're better, they're more talented, they're more experienced than the Mavericks, but what you have to know about this series is the Dallas Mavericks had a 2-0 lead, and many people at that point wrote the Clippers off. They said, man, Dallas is looking good. The Clippers are going to fold. It's over. But the Clippers ultimately rallied, and they came back and won the series in 7 games. Now, you might ask, who's ultimately to blame for this collapse by the Dallas Mavericks? To me, I blame Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle did win a championship back in 2011 with the Dallas Mavericks as their head coach, but ever since then, the Dallas Mavericks have not even won a first-round playoff series. I think Rick Carlisle is slowly becoming overrated rather than underrated, which he was a couple of years ago. He didn't make enough adjustments, whereas Tyronn Lue did make some adjustments. And, I also blame the Dallas Mavericks defense. They could not get stops when they needed most defensively. And if you're a bad defensive team, if you're an all-time bad defensive team, and the Dallas Mavericks are an all-time bad defensive team, you're not going to win a series, okay? But I most importantly blame, crazy enough, Luka Doncic for the Dallas Mavericks losing in the first round to the Clippers. And I know what you're going to say, Jamon, Luka averaged 35 points per game, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, shot 49% from the field. And ultimately, I will admit, he played really, really, really well. And ultimately, the better team won this series. But the details matter. I watched that series. And Dallas looked like they were just as good, if not the better team, on most nights. And Dallas had a 2-0 lead in the series. And even after that, when they squandered that 2-0 lead, they had a 3-2 lead. And when it mattered the most, guess what? Luka Doncic came up small. And I know he had an amazing Game 7. He couldn't have done much more in Game 7. But the problem is, Luka had a chance to close out the Clippers in Game 3 and 4. And ultimately, he also had a chance in Game number 6. There should have never been a Game 7. Okay? And Luka Doncic is at a point where he's so good that I have to raise the standards for him. His standards are already very high. Everyone seemed to be anointing Luka Doncic during this series as a top 5 player in all basketball. And I say to that, no. You must win a playoff series, Luka Doncic, before I anoint you a top 5 player in all basketball. Because in game number 4, you scored 19 points and shot 37% from the field at home. That's not a way to close out a team. In game 6 at home, Kawhi Leonard outplayed you down the stretch. Okay? And Kawhi Leonard was the guy that refused to lose. And also, keep this in mind. Luka Doncic, during this series, shot 54% from the free throw line. That is abysmal, that is atrocious, and that is all-time bad for an NBA superstar, point blank period, okay? Especially of Luka Doncic's caliber. I know he's not an elite free throw shooter, but Luka can knock down 70 to 75% of his free throws. 54% is not good enough. And what do you know? Maybe if the maybe if the Mavericks shoot a little bit better from the free throw line, maybe they win the series, you know? He also played pretty lousy defense, and in the fourth quarter, his numbers went down significantly. Went down from three-point range, field goal percentage, points per game, you know, things like that. He just wasn't able to close out the Clippers. And I'm not here to crush Luka Doncic because he has a tremendous career ahead of him. I could see him winning multiple championships, but Luka Doncic, when it's all said and done, he did not close out the Clippers when it mattered most. He was the guy that the Mavericks looked to go to. He was not there when it mattered most, and Kawhi Leonard was. Maybe Luka can win a playoff series next year and going forward. We'll see. I'm definitely sure he will. But so far, I have to blame Luka Doncic for a big reason why the Clippers were able to come back in the series versus the Dallas Mavericks. So the Brooklyn Nets are currently up 2-1 on the Milwaukee Bucks. In the second round of the 2021 NBA playoffs. I felt the Brooklyn Nets were going to win this series in 6 games. I could see it being, done in 5 games. Brooklyn definitely looks like the better team. But what you have to know about Brooklyn right now is this. James Harden is currently injured for the Brooklyn Nets. He got injured in game number 1 versus the Milwaukee Bucks. He injured his hamstring, and that's a hamstring that he also injured during the regular season where he missed a significant amount of time. And currently James Harden is day-to-day. My guess is if the Brooklyn Nets make the NBA Finals, and I believe they will, he will be available to play during the NBA Finals. And look, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you obviously want James Harden available to play. James Harden is an amazing player. And he's super talented, And Brooklyn is not in this position if they don't trade for James Harden because Kyrie Irving missed games this year, Kevin Durant missed games this year due to injury, and James Harden played at an MVP level and carried the load while those guys were hurt. And I've said consistently, James Harden's a top 5 player in this league. He's an excellent scorer. He's an excellent passer. This year, he's proven to be a very unselfish player. And now he's playing good defense, actually, And he makes life easier for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, obviously. However, I believe the Brooklyn Nets can win the NBA championship without James Harden. I believe they can this year, and maybe if James Harden gets hurt next year, they'll still be amongst the championship favorites, okay? And by the way, before the Brooklyn Nets even traded for James Harden, I said they could win a championship if Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are on their A game, if the role players step up. I said that in the past. Even before James Harden got traded, I came out and said the Brooklyn Nets are going to win a championship during the Kevin Durant era, okay? I think James Harden just really put the icing on the cake, Now, here's the thing. If Kevin Durant gets hurt for this team, they're not going to win the championship. I'm not going to say they have no shot, but Kyrie Irving and James Harden as a duo is not Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving as a duo, or Kevin Durant and James Harden if Kyrie Irving got hurt, Look, here's the thing. Because Kevin Durant is so great, that's why I have confidence the Brooklyn Nets can win a championship even without James Harden, an MVP level player, because Kevin Durant, to me right now, is the best player in the world. He's a near perfect basketball player. He's 7 feet tall with a 7'6" wingspan. He has handles like a guard. He's an excellent mid-range shooter. He can hit shots from 30 feet out. He's a great three-point shooter. He also showed the ability to facilitate an offense. He's super efficient. Kevin Durant's the real deal. He's a walking bucket. And teams are just going to have to deal with the fact that even on Kevin Durant's worst nights, he's probably going to score 30 points, just like he did in game number 3 versus Milwaukee. Didn't shoot very well from the field, still dropped 30 points, still was excellent in the clutch. And Brooklyn also has some really good players outside of Kevin Durant. Like I mentioned, Kyrie Irving's excellent. This year, Kyrie Irving shot 50% from the field, 40% from three-point range, and 90% from the 3-point line, from the free throw line, pardon me. If Kyrie Irving is your second option, You can win a championship. We saw that with LeBron James several years ago when the Golden State Warriors won 73 games and Kyrie Irving and LeBron James were absolutely berserk in the NBA Finals down the stretch. They won that series. You know, you still got a guy like Joe Harris, who's one of the best three-point shooters in all basketball. Blake Griffin is an excellent role player. Bruce Brown is a good role player. Nicholas Claxton's a good big down low, you know. Mike James, Jeff Green. The Brooklyn Nets right now are arguably the most talented team in all basketball. At least they're the most talented team in the Eastern Conference, you know? And I think they can still win the championship even without James Harden. Obviously, if James Harden is there, it's pretty much unfair for teams because, well, if you have James Harden along with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I don't think anyone else has the firepower to match that. Maybe you can beat them in a game or two, but you can't beat that team 4 times. And if James Harden is out, obviously it makes things a little bit easier for you, but Kevin Durant's a bad boy. And as long as Kevin Durant's the best player in the world, as long as he has Kyrie Irving or a superstar level player by his side, along with solid role players, there's no way to me any other team is beating this Brooklyn Nets squad. And Steve Nash is a pretty underrated head coach, even though he does have some flaws. So I believe the Brooklyn Nets can win the championship without James Harden for all the reasons that I mentioned. And, you know, I just talked about James Harden. Now I want to talk about Kevin Durant once again because I want to make something very clear. Kevin Durant is the Brooklyn Nets' best player as well as their most important player and most valuable player, okay? If I'm defending the Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant are on the floor, Kevin Durant is the one guy I want to try to take away. And if I'm the Brooklyn Nets organization, he's the one star that I know I cannot afford to lose. Okay? As good as James Harden is, he has not proven he can win a championship as the number one option on a championship team. He just hasn't proven it. And I've defended James Harden in the past, but he's had some choke jobs in the playoffs, okay? Even though James Harden to me is still a top 5 player in the world, even though James Harden to me is not a playoff choker, we've seen James Harden in the playoffs consistently, and he's had chances to get over the hump. We've seen him be a lesser version of himself, unfortunately, okay? And, you know, we're in this world where we like to debate things and argue on Twitter about who's the most important player, who's the best player, who's the most valuable player. And people, when Kevin Durant was on the Golden State Warriors, they argued, okay, Kevin Durant might be the best player on the Golden State Warriors, but Steph Curry's the most valuable. He's the most important player. And I said to those people, no, Kevin Durant's both. Kevin Durant, when he was in Golden State, was both the best player and the most important player, and thirdly, the most valuable player on that team because he's just that good. Kevin Durant is in the conversation for being the most skilled and most talented basketball player to ever live. He's, at least to me, the most talented scorer in NBA history. And Harden is the only one right now that really challenges Durant on the Brooklyn Nets roster for who's really the best player on the team. But when you compare James Harden and Kevin Durant, Kevin Durant's a better shooter. He's a more efficient shooter. He's the better defender. He's the better rebounder. He's just as good from the free throw line as James Harden. He's a willing passer. While he's not, the passer that James Harden is, he's a willing passer. He can facilitate an offense. And I've seen Kevin Durant close out games and be clutch in the playoffs consistently. James Harden was not a closer and was not a clutch player with the Houston Rockets in the playoffs. And part of that wasn't all his fault because he didn't always quite have the coaching staff and the support he needed in Houston. I will admit that. But we've seen Kevin Durant in the playoffs be an even better version of himself at times, We've seen him win multiple NBA Finals MVPs. He should have won 3 straight NBA Finals MVPs if he didn't get hurt, in the 2019 playoffs. They would have beaten the Toronto Raptors in the NBA Finals, And even back in Oklahoma City when James Harden and Kevin Durant were on the same team, Kevin Durant was by far the best player on the team. And he was the reason the Oklahoma City Thunder got to the NBA Finals. He was the leader of that team, okay? And even this year, Kevin Durant, you've seen him and James Harden on the same court playing for the same team in the playoffs. Kevin Durant's been the better player. He just has. Look at the numbers. Watch the games. Look at the eye test, Kevin Durant is third all-time in points per game in the playoffs, only trailing Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan. Kevin Durant is an historically great player. And people have said Kevin Durant can't carry a team. That is a bunch of baloney. Because Kevin Durant is definitely more than talented enough to carry a team based on his skill set and based on the fact that he's the best player in the world. I'd imagine the best player in the world has the ability to carry a team to the playoffs. And we even saw in 2014 when he won the league MVP, Russell Westbrook missed more than half of the season. And the Oklahoma City Thunder had no other all-star on the team. And Kevin Durant put them on his back and nearly won 60 games. Okay? So I don't want to hear that Kevin Durant can't carry a team. Kevin Durant is the best player on the Brooklyn Nets. He's the most important player, and he's the most valuable player. And if the Brooklyn Nets are going to win a championship, as long as they have Kevin Durant on the roster, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, but it's pretty darn close. Now, if you have James Harden and Kyrie Irving, you will be in contention, but you probably will somehow come short of a championship because James Harden has shown in his career in the past, even though he's an all-time great player and he could break the spell one day, he just has not been a better playoff performer than Kevin Durant. Point blank, period. That's how I feel about Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets overall. So, I want to talk about LeBron James and the Lakers once again right here on the show. So, we've seen LeBron James play in a Los Angeles Lakers uniform for 3 straight years. The first year, because of injuries, LeBron James and the Lakers missed the playoffs. The second year, LeBron James and the Lakers go on to win the title. Now, granted, I believe the pandemic and playing in a bubble really aided the Los Angeles Lakers, but nonetheless, I don't take anything away from that championship. And this past year, when many people thought the Lakers were a favorite to win the championship, they lost in the first round to the Phoenix Suns. And here's the thing. Here's where I'm at with LeBron James and the Lakers. We are trending towards the LeBron James era with the Los Angeles Lakers ending with only one championship being won. Okay? It feels to me like LeBron James is probably not going to win another championship with the Los Angeles Lakers. I think the Western Conference is absolutely loaded. Today, Phoenix is better than the Lakers. You can make the argument the Jazz are better. The Clippers, the Mavericks are a team that's on the rise. I believe the Denver Nuggets, when healthy, they have more better players than the Lakers. The Grizzlies are a team on the rise. And while Portland isn't a team that's going to win a championship, they're not a pushover, And LeBron James is going to be 37 years old this upcoming season. And he's dealt with some injuries in the past 2 years. And the reality is, LeBron James is not as dominant as he used to be. And that's okay, because Father Time is undefeated. It catches everyone eventually. Maybe except Tom Brady, okay? But that's a story for another day, okay? And we've also seen that Anthony Davis, for the most part throughout his career, he can't stay healthy. He's not going to be able to play 60 to 70 games a year. He's not shown that he's going to always be reliable enough to take the mantle from LeBron James eventually as the best player on the Lakers, okay? And they were hoping that's what they were going to get when they traded for Anthony Davis, okay? Now, here's the thing. The Lakers, to me at least, need a third star player on this roster. They have 2 star players, LeBron and Anthony Davis. I believe they need to add one more superstar or star-level player if they're serious about winning an NBA championship. This current roster is good, but do you want to be good or do you want to be great? Los Angeles Lakers fans, you got to answer that question for me. I'm gonna assume that most of you guys want your team to be great, not just good. The Kansas City Chiefs, they said we're good with Alex Smith, but we can be great if we draft Patrick Mahomes. We can be great if we retool our offensive line and address our weaknesses this year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they said we could be great if we sign Tom Brady. We could be great if we sign a bunch of these free agents and go all in and say, screw the future. The Brooklyn Nets, they went all in with James Harden this year. They said, even though we have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, we can be the ultimate favorites to win the championship if we trade for James Harden. Same thing with the Golden State Warriors. That is why I believe LeBron James should recruit Steph Curry and or Damian Lillard to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. Because here's the thing. Steph Curry, after the 2022 NBA season, he's going to be a free agent. His contract expires. He will have the option to either re-sign with the Warriors or go to whichever team he wants. And I think Steph Curry has done a lot of great things in Golden State. But if Steph Curry really wants to win championships, he could join LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And that team can legitimately challenge the Brooklyn Nets out east. I know I'm kind of anointing the Brooklyn Nets as maybe the next potential dynasty, but that's how confident I am in the Brooklyn Nets as a whole. That's how confident in Kevin Durant I am. That team is a juggernaut, okay? And you're probably going to have to beat that team over the next 3 to 5 years if you want to win a championship at some point, okay? So, I think Steph Curry will be a great option for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I'm sorry, Dennis Schroeder's a good player, but he ain't no daggone Steph Curry, okay? For me right now, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry are the 3 best players in all basketball. And also, I bring up Damian Lillard because I've been saying for years, the Portland Trailblazers have been wasting away some of Damian Lillard's best years. And now, there are some whispers out there that Damian Lillard potentially might be wanting to leave the Portland Trailblazers. He might force his way out like James Harden. When James Harden said, yeah, this Houston Rockets team, it's cooked. I can't win a championship here. I'm done. I want out. He forced his way out. He goes to Brooklyn with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Might very well win a championship this year. I think Damian Lillard could do something very similar. If I'm LeBron James, I'm recruiting the heck out of Damian Lillard. I'm telling Damian Lillard, hey man, look, your legacy is set in Portland, but you're not going to win a championship there. You can come win a championship here with me and Anthony Davis. If you pair Damian Lillard or Steph Curry up with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, boy, is that a juggernaut, okay? And you need multiple superstars to win a championship these days. I'm sorry. That's kind of how it is, especially with the way Brooklyn's looking. So that's how I feel about the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James. Look, LeBron's had a great career, but if he truly wants to become the greatest basketball player of all time, and if he truly wants to continue to win championships, he should recruit Steph Curry or Damian Lillard to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. I want to talk about Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets now. So Nikola Jokic is coming off a season. Well, the season is still afloat right now, but Nikola Jokic just recently won the 2021 NBA MVP. I felt that he was well deserving of the award, and he would have gotten my vote. And the Denver Nuggets did beat the Portland Trailblazers in round 1 of the 2021 NBA playoffs, but now it's not looking so good versus the Phoenix Suns. They potentially could get swept. I think they probably win a game, but the series is going no further than 5 games. You know, the Phoenix Suns are a loaded basketball team. The Denver Nuggets, they're a really good team, but they don't quite have the horses to beat a team like Phoenix this year. But I will say, even though the Nuggets are going to lose in the second round of the playoffs in 2021, the Denver Nuggets championship window is still wide open. Okay, it's still wide open. I even said that last year. You know, when people said the Denver Nuggets were a fluke after they made the conference finals when they beat the Clippers, I said, nah, the Denver Nuggets are going to be here to stay. And this year, the Denver Nuggets had a great season when you take into account all the injuries that they suffer. You know, Jamal Murray goes down with an injury. Will Barton goes down with an injury. 2 very good key players for the Denver Nuggets roster, okay? 2 starters, actually. And Nikola Jokic really had to carry this Denver Nuggets team down the stretch, and he was able to do so. And I just think to myself, man, if the Denver Nuggets are healthy next year, and they bring back Jamal Murray, who can give you 20 points per game on any given night. We saw what he did in the playoffs last year. If they bring back Will Barton healthy, who's a really underrated guard, if Michael Porter Jr., who has superstar level potential, continues to get better and better, and Nikola Jokic continues to have an MVP level season, from this point going forward, if he continues to play at an MVP level, Denver's going to be a team to be reckoned with. They have 4 legitimate guys that are really, really good. And I think Denver, they're well coached. I really am a big fan of Mike Malone, their head coach. I really believe in what he brings to the table. And I truly believe in what Nikola Jokic brings to the table as a leader of this Denver Nuggets roster. Nikola Jokic is only scratching the surface. He just won the league MVP this year, and I don't even think we've seen the best version of Jokic yet, okay? Imagine how effective Jokic is going to be when you can't double team him, when you have to pay attention to Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr. This year in the playoffs, they just pretty much, said, hey, Jokic, you got to carry us. And Jokic put up really good numbers, and he won a playoff series for Denver. But in today's NBA, if you've only really got one superstar level player carrying your team, you can only go so far. But I think Denver is a really deep team, and next year, I would not be shocked if they make the NBA Finals. And I have a good feeling that over the next 5 years, the Denver Nuggets will eventually win a championship in the Nikola Jokic era. The Denver Nuggets championship window is still wide open, and I believe because Nikola Jokic is really good, I believe in this roster, I believe in the scouting department. They drafted really well, the organization's well run, and Mike Malone is a very good head coach, and I don't see him being fired anytime soon. I believe the Denver Nuggets championship window is still wide open, no doubt about it, led by Nikola Jokic. So, we all know Danny Ainge stepped down as the Boston Celtics general manager several weeks ago, and I wanted to talk about it here on the show because I didn't really get a chance to address it, last week. And what you have to know about Danny Ainge is he was the Boston Celtics general manager for 18 years, and he stepped down, but that was kind of a way of the Celtics, I think, really saying that he pretty much got fired. They said Danny Ainge has decided to step down, when in reality he probably got fired. But again, a lot of people, spin it that way to, make things sound good, But ultimately, to me, it was time. Danny Ainge is a really good general manager, but I think the Boston Celtics hit their ceiling with him being the general manager of the team, okay? And they've been a viable playoff team nearly every single year. And look, you could do a whole lot worse than Danny Ainge. But the harsh reality is that Danny Ainge underachieved as general manager of the Boston Celtics. And change was needed. The Celtics are an historically elite and a well-run franchise. They've won 17 championships. The only team that's close to that is the Los Angeles Lakers, who've won 17 championships as well. And under Danny Ainge, during the 18 years he was there, Boston won 1 championship. And that was great, but it's not good enough. If you're the general manager of the Boston Celtics and you only win 1 championship during nearly a 2-decade period, that is not good enough. Now, if you're a general manager of the Mavericks, the Pistons, the Cavaliers, the Warriors, the Raptors, then yeah, I understand that. Because those are not franchises that are being held to the same standard as the Celtics. But I'm sorry, but what Danny Ainge did was not good enough with the Boston Celtics. It just wasn't. He was very good, but Danny Ainge was brought in to bring greatness to the Boston Celtics. And outside of 1 championship run where he traded for Kevin Garnett and he paired them up with Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, when Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and Paul Pierce paired up together, a lot of disappointments, And has Danny Ainge had some bad luck? Yes. Kyrie Irving one time got hurt. Paul Pierce and Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett eventually got old. But the reality is Danny Ainge was just not aggressive enough. At one point, Danny Ainge had an opportunity to go out and get Anthony Davis. He failed to do so. Kevin Durant was a free agent. A lot of people thought Kevin Durant might go to the Boston Celtics. Danny Ainge and the Boston Celtics did a poor job of recruiting Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant ends up going to the Brooklyn Nets. He had a chance to go get Kawhi Leonard. Failed to do so. Had a chance to go out there and get James Harden. He failed to do so. And the reality is Danny Ainge relied way too much on his draft picks. And you can get to a conference finals, homegrowing your players, having a team that's well coached, maybe with one superstar level player, that guy being Jason Tatum. You can get to a conference finals like the Celtics did last year. But Danny Ainge was all about assets. I need assets, draft picks. And it's ironic that he walks out the door without any high-end draft picks or assets. No high-end young players outside of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who you're probably not going to trade away, because if you trade one of those guys away, your team is pretty much a dumpster fire, And I don't know. I just think that Danny Ainge, he was really good for the Boston Celtics organization, but I think that ultimately he underachieved because he was very good, but he was brought in to be great for the Boston Celtics, and he fell short. Ultimately, that's how I feel. I've been very critical of the Green Bay Packers organization. I do not currently consider Green Bay to be a Super Bowl caliber organization by today's standards. One thing I will say about Green Bay is this. They can get the quarterback right. We've seen them draft Brett Favre. Well, they didn't draft Brett Favre. They traded for Brett Favre, but they got their hands on Brett Favre. They also drafted Aaron Rodgers, so they can get the quarterback right. Bart Starr is an all-time great quarterback. They seem to get that position right, over the past couple of years. And they've done a pretty decent job of drafting and home-growing their players. But a big reason why I say Green Bay is not a Super Bowl caliber roster is because they're just flat out not aggressive enough. Teams like Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the Rams, Seattle, Tampa Bay. These teams are taking big swings, making big moves, and they just flat out are way more aggressive and way more better at adapting than Green Bay. Okay? And an example of this is Green Bay in 2019 goes to an NFC Championship game. They were one game away from the Super Bowl. They lose that game. They clearly are not better than the team they lost to in San Francisco. And what does Green Bay do the very next year? They throw in the towel and say, no, we're not going to support Aaron Rodgers. We don't care about winning a Super Bowl. We're going to prepare for the future by drafting Jordan Love, a quarterback that we don't need. That's an example of what I'm talking about, okay? And Green Bay never seems to go out and get big-time free agents. When you hear guys like Julio Jones, Khalil Mack, J.J. Watt being out on the market, you always think, man, if Green Bay gets their hands on one of those players, maybe they could win the Super Bowl. They never get their hands on one of those players. That's the reality. And I've always thought to myself, why is Green Bay not aggressive enough? Why does Green Bay not understand that you need to be aggressive in today's NBA? And I think the same way about the Boston Celtics. I think to myself, why aren't the Boston Celtics going out of their way to acquire James Harden, to acquire Kevin Durant, to acquire Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard? And the reality is this. The Boston Celtics have become the Green Bay Packers of the National Basketball Association. And again, you can take that as a good thing or a bad thing, because we know for a fact that Green Bay, they're not a dumpster fire. They're not like the Washington Redskins of the past or the Cleveland Browns of the past or the New York Jets. They're a well-run organization that is going to put a solid product out on the field. But a long time ago, Green Bay was known as Title Town. And now, they're not always in the Super Bowl picture. In fact, they haven't won a Super Bowl in over a decade, okay? So if you care about a team just being relevant and competing, that's fine, but I have high standards, and that's not all I care about. I want my team to win a championship. And I think Boston Celtics fans should feel the same way about their team. Boston's not a train wreck. They draft well. They're going to field a competitive team every year. They're a pretty well-run franchise. but they haven't won a championship in over a decade. And for a team, or I should say for a franchise that is the all-time leader in championships won with 17, isn't that just kind of weird? I mean, the Los Angeles Lakers standard every year is championship or bust. That's just how it is. And to me, both Green Bay and Boston rely way too much on draft picks. They're not aggressive enough. Other teams that haven't been historically better than the Boston Celtics are better than them today. Teams like Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, those teams right now are all better than Boston, but historically, that was never the case. And same thing with the Green Bay Packers. Historically, Tampa Bay, the Rams, the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Browns, these teams never used to be on Green Bay's level. But those teams have adapted, and those teams have caught up to the Green Bay Packers. And the crazy thing is, what I don't understand about Green Bay and Boston is this. When these teams make trades, they win, okay? When Green Bay acquired Reggie White, an all-time great defensive player, they won a Super Bowl because of it. When they acquired Charles Woodson, they won a Super Bowl. When Boston acquired Kevin Garnett to go along with Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, they won a championship. So I don't understand this, we're going to stand back and let Romeo Langford develop. We're going to stand back and let Marquez Valdes-Scantling develop for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. I don't understand it. And that's how I feel about Boston and Green Bay. I think the Boston Celtics and the Green Bay Packers are two franchises that have gotten too comfortable with their success. Those two franchises are good with being just good enough. And the standards have lowered, apparently. And I think the Green Bay Packers have become the Boston Celtics of the NFL. I think the Boston Celtics have become the Green Bay Packers of the National Basketball Association. So the Portland Trailblazers recently agreed to mutually part ways with Terry Stotts. Now, I was actually kind of shocked that this move went down because I didn't think Portland had the guts to fire a guy like Terry Stotts, okay? And by the way, I actually agree with this move. I really do. Terry Stotts, as a coach, peaked with the Portland Trailblazers. And again, that's fine because even sometimes the greatest head coaches of all time, they eventually peak with a franchise. Sometimes you just got to get a new guy in the building, And Terry Stotts was a very successful coach with the Portland Trailblazers, and he will get another opportunity elsewhere. In 9 years in Portland, he made the playoffs 8 times, including a conference finals appearance in 2019, which is the round before the NBA Finals. But I will also say this, Terry Stotts, he's not responsible for the fact that the Portland Trailblazers organization never really went out their way to get him another star-level player besides Damian Lillard. I think Portland's always been good with just being good enough. Very similar to the Green Bay Packers, where they're good with drafting players and homegrown guys and keeping a superstar-level player like Damian Lillard around, a.k.a. Aaron Rodgers, even though Aaron Rodgers is a much more all-time great player than a guy like Damian Lillard, But these types of organizations and teams and these small market teams, they just never take the next step. And the next step for Portland, if they're serious about winning a championship in the Damian Lillard era, and if they're serious about actually keeping Damian Lillard, they got the first step right. Fire the head coach, because I think Terry Stotts peaked with the team. Now they must go out and get a good head coach, but also find another superstar level player to go alongside Damian Lillard. That is the next step for the Portland Trailblazers. However, I will say firing Terry Stotts was a pretty good move in my opinion. I think that it was the right move ultimately. It was. Even though Terry Stotts is a very good head coach, his time was up in Portland. I applaud the Portland Trailblazers for realizing that. Now it's time for them to go out there and get Damian Lillard some legitimate help so he can win a championship. Okay, so I have 2 more topics I want to talk about. Then I'm going to end the show. So we all know the Dallas Mavericks, like I said earlier, they lost to the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round of the 2021 NBA playoffs in 7 games. And look, I held Luka Doncic accountable. I felt that Luka Doncic had a chance to really take over this series when the Dallas Mavericks were up 2-0, when they were up 3-2, and in certain games, I felt Luka Doncic could have been better in the fourth quarter. But the bottom line is Luka Doncic was amazing. A big reason why the Dallas Mavericks lost a series they should have won versus the Los Angeles Clippers is because Rick Carlisle and the Dallas Mavericks got out-coached. And Rick Carlisle, by the way, is the current head coach for the Dallas Mavericks. And the first 2 games of the series, I felt Dallas came out with a chip on their shoulder. I felt they executed their game plan. And after that, after the first 2 games, I felt Dallas made 0 to no adjustments from game to game. That is on Rick Carlisle, the current Dallas Mavericks head coach. And Dallas has been to the playoffs 9 times during the Rick Carlisle era. But guess what? 7 times during the Rick Carlisle era, the Dallas Mavericks have lost in the first round. I will say this. Rick Carlisle is an NBA champion. We all know about the Dallas Mavericks winning the 2011 NBA Finals versus LeBron James and the Miami Heat. We can never take that away from Rick Carlisle. He's an NBA champion. But you know, when I evaluate players and coaches, you know what I tend to do? I tend to take away your best and worst season and kind of evaluate you from there from time to time. Because, look, usually if you take away the worst season of a player or a coach and the best season of a player and a coach where they were at an all-time high and an all-time low, the rest of it kind of reveals what they are. You know, Tom Brady, if you take away his best and worst season, he's still an all-time great player. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers, same thing with Peyton Manning. But if you take away Matt Ryan's best and worst season, we come to find out that he's not always an MVP candidate level player. Even though in his best season, he won a league MVP, you know? And I think Rick Carlisle is slowly becoming overrated as a head coach. Because if you take away the championship run that Rick Carlisle and the Dallas Mavericks went on in 2011 when they won the NBA championship, isn't Rick Carlisle nothing more than an average head coach? And by the way, I'm a Rick Carlisle fan. I'm taking nothing away from what Rick Carlisle has done. He's an NBA champion as a head coach. You can never take that away from him. But kind of like Terry Stotts, like I said earlier, I think Rick Carlisle has peaked with the Dallas Mavericks. And I think the Dallas Mavericks need to bring in a new head coach and bring in another superstar level player to help out Luka Doncic. So if I'm the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to fire Rick Carlisle. I don't think they're going to because I think Mark Cuban is very loyal to Rick Carlisle. But I think that Mark Cuban really needs to start reconsidering, Rick Carlisle's position because, well, the last couple of years, Dallas hasn't really been a team that's been known for winning playoff series. And they've had some talented players, So that's how I feel about the Dallas Mavericks. Ultimately, I think Rick Carlisle needs to be fired. And I think he's peaked with the Dallas Mavericks. We'll see if I'm proven wrong, but I don't think I will be. So I want to end the show by talking about Blake Griffin. So when Blake Griffin signed with the Brooklyn Nets midway through the season, I felt it was a great picker for the Brooklyn Nets. I know Blake Griffin is not quite what he used to be when he was with the Los Angeles Clippers, where he was consistently averaging 20 to 25 points per game. But Blake Griffin is still a really good player. And he's kind of the Swiss Army knife for the Brooklyn Nets. He does everything. He scores the basketball. He rebounds. He's a willing passer. He's defending at a high level. And he's even diving for loose balls. Blake Griffin now is comfortable in his role. And Blake Griffin saw an opportunity to leave the Detroit Pistons and go play for the Brooklyn Nets, a team that has a chance to win the championship. And Blake Griffin so far hasn't been super relied upon to deliver for the Brooklyn Nets. I know he had a great game one versus the Milwaukee Bucks when James Harden went down, where he scored like 18 points. He was diving for loose balls. He was rebounding, playing good defense. But I think that we're going to eventually see at some point, maybe in the next round of the playoffs, maybe in the NBA Finals, we're going to see one game from Blake Griffin where we're going to say, man, he was super duper valuable. And the thing you like most about Blake Griffin is he has no big ego anymore. He has his statistics. He's gotten paid his money. All Blake Griffin wants to do now is win a championship with the Brooklyn Nets. He even said that. And he's sacrificing some minutes. He's sacrificing possessions and points to be the bigger guy for the team. He's doing things that even don't really show up on the stat sheet. Setting really good screens, going out for loose balls, motivating the team, things like that. So I think Blake Griffin is a vital piece for the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, you got Kevin Durant, you got Kyrie Irving. If James Harden comes back healthy, he's a great player as well. I've been a big James Harden defender over the past couple of years. You got a pretty solid bench. And I think Brooklyn right now is the best team in all basketball. I think they have a chance to become potentially the next dynasty and win the 2021 NBA Finals. I think Blake Griffin is a bigger part of that picture than you guys realize. He will prove to continue to be vital to the Brooklyn Nets as time goes on. Well, everyone, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. Have a God bless day. Stay safe, and I'm Ghost. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juiciest Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big-time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juiciest Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.